Thank you. All right. Where were you when the planes hit the towers?
Well, I was living and working in Denver at the time and was working the night shift. So I was actually asleep when everything started, and I got a phone call and said, hey, you need to wake up and turn on the television. And when you first see what was going on, the first plane had hit the first tower, but the second plane hadn't hit yet. And there was a lot of talk. I remember a lot of chatter amongst the anchors that were talking about, wow, this is a pretty freak accident. And no one was really leaning toward that terrorist angle at the beginning. And then all of a sudden, the second plane smashed into the second tower. And I can't remember who it was. It was either Brokaw or Roker or somebody basically said, there's no doubt now that this is a terrorist act. And when you hear those words and you see what is going on the TV screen in front of you, it really hits home, and it hits home in a very hard and fast way.
What was kind of going through your mind as you're seeing that stuff?
Well, I couldn't at first wrap my head around how many people were being impacted by it, how many people had gotten out of the towers, how many people were still in the buildings, were evacuations going on. I just couldn't quite figure what was going on as far as people, and I can remember just really hoping and praying that they were getting as many people out of those buildings as they possibly could, because at that point collapse wasn't even something that they were talking about. They were just talking about the fires and trying to rescue the people that were directly impacted. And when it became apparent that collapse was possible, that's when you started thinking about not only the people that were in the buildings, but were in the adjacent buildings, on the ground around there. And it really started to hit home that this was going to be, it already was a very major, impactful event, but it was going to be something quite bigger if those buildings did come down.
Did you know anybody that was there?
No, I didn't know anyone that was there, but through friends and family, had some people that were actually in the towers and luckily were evacuated. No one that I knew personally, but friends of friends. And knowing that, even though I wasn't directly personally involved, you still couldn't help but feel, wow, these are people's mothers, people's fathers, friends, husbands, wives, children that are in those buildings. And you couldn't quite help but really feel for them and what they were going through, and then kind of watching it all shake out and seeing the interviews with the people that are trying to get a hold of friends and family. And I think even that afternoon we started hearing cell phone messages and answering machines in people's homes of people that were in the building saying, hey, I'm okay, they're evacuating, we're going to get out, I'll talk to you later. And then finding out later down the road that those were some of the people that died when the towers came down. It was just a remarkable string of events that I don't think any of us could ever forget.
Anything else that you can think of that we haven't touched?
Well, it was interesting because I remember kicking into journalist mode. And that's part of being in this business, is that you kind of think about it from a news aspect, a news angle first, and sometimes a human standpoint second. But that was one of those instances where you wavered back and forth. You had a job that you wanted to do from the journalism standpoint, but the human being inside of you could see the tragedy that was unfolding in front of you, literally on TV screens, live. And I can't remember a time in history where we were able to take part as a nation in something like this all at the same time. And as a journalist, you're wanting to dig in, what do I need to do? You want to get to work. You want to, start covering the story from the angles that are going to impact the people that are in your particular area. But at the same time, you're just heartbroken watching the thing unfold on television. And throughout the afternoon, watching the national coverage of it, and then well into that night as well, you just, you couldn't really fathom that this had actually happened. And then you start talking to friends and family and neighbors and everything else about it, and the wellspring of anger and animosity was palpable even by that afternoon, because we knew that it was an attack and it wasn't something that was just an accident or anything like that. And I remember how I felt on September 11th. but I also remember how I felt on September 12th, the day after, and what that entailed. What do we do next? How do we go after the people that did this? And what do we do as a nation to make sure that something like this never happens on our soil again? And when you start thinking about it from that aspect, it was very difficult to grab a hold all of those feelings and kind of get them into something that was going to be constructive. But I think as a country, we were different. Within a 24-hour period, we went from being kind of lackadaisical and not seeing the bigger picture to all of us being very quickly forced into seeing a bigger picture of what was going on in our world and knowing that we had to do everything in our power to keep something like that from happening again.
That's it.
Cool.